must be some kind of way out of here. Say the joker to the thief.
Good afternoon, everybody. Today we have back for a second time Bill Reeder, retired colonel. So last time that we talked, Bill, you educated myself about you flying the OV-1 planes, and then we got to the point that you had a crash in that one that you were able to walk away from. And then we got to at the end of the very the first interview was your Cobra. So you were flying. You were there to support SOG on some of their missions, and then we just got to the second of your shoot downs, which is very unfortunate. And this one had quite a few different events that had happened. So can we, for the start of this, can we talk about what happened in that event that you, when you were flying the Cobra and you were shot down, like where you were and the events? Like the first one, you told us that you were able to evade. Actually, that's where we should start.
Okay.
That you were able to evade the enemy, and the 20th SOS Green Hornets saved you. And last time we talked, you had all of the crew names, and I was able to dig around, and sadly I found out that most of those men are not with us anymore, but one of the pilots, his son, is still around. So I was able to put you in touch with that gentleman. His name is Kip. And that was a pretty cool story that you were able to trade some chats about what his father did and what you were doing. And so that was kind of a cool, conclusion, because I know you'd been trying to find out those men's names for a long time, right?
We can pick up with that and then transition to the second tour if you like, because that was a huge event in my life, Jason, and
Yes.
You were personally responsible for closing up this loose end. I was shot down in an OV-1 Mohawk on my first tour, doing special classified missions over the border in Laos, along the coast of North Vietnam. Had one highly classified mission to Cambodia. And on one of those missions into Laos, I got shot down in a Mohawk. Had a very short parachute ride after I ejected out of the aircraft, and it was on the ground, evading. I was actually running from the enemy in hot pursuit of me, very close by, for the better part of an hour before getting rescued by a helicopter from the 20th Air Force, U.S. Air Force 20th Special Operations Squadron, and that detachment was stationed out of Udon, Thailand. Ever since that day, I had been interested, particularly since getting back from Vietnam and over the years, interested in tracking down that crew that rescued me and just giving them a big thank you for saving my life, and never could find anything out about any of them until I looked at your book, found your book about the 20th SOS, the Green Hornets. And at the end of the book is a historical lineage of the organization. And then I tracked down the dates, and there it was, 1 March 1969, and had the names of the crew that picked me up. And then in dialoguing with you and thanking you for the names, you went on a search and found out that the crew had since passed, but the son of one of the pilots of the Huey that came in was alive and well, and I got in touch with him. I don't know if I shared with you, and that's what I was just fumbling around to get. He had a copy of the Distinguished Flying Cross that his father got for that mission. It might just take a minute. Would you like to hear what the citation?
Sure. Yeah.
Was about? And this, I don't know. It brought emotional chills to me in reading this, because this is the guy who, if it wasn't for his heroic actions that got this DFC on that day in Laos, I would probably would have died that day or been captured by very unfriendly groups. Not that they were friendly to catch me the next time, but I don't think there were any survivors came out of that part of Laos with people that captured him. Okay, his name was Kip Harkness, and the citation reads, Captain Delbert W. Harkness distinguished himself by heroism while participating in aerial flight as a UH-1F pilot in Southeast Asia on 1 March 1969. On that date, Captain Harkness flew his unarmed and unarmored helicopter through intense hostile ground fire without benefit of armed escort aircraft to rescue two downed United States Army aircrew members who were surrounded. The exceptional courage and professionalism of Captain Harkness certainly saved the lives of two fellow airmen who were in imminent danger of capture. The outstanding heroism and selfless devotion to duty displayed by Captain Harkness reflect great credit upon himself and the United States Air Force. Yeah, that was pretty awesome to see that and know that that was the guy that saved my life all those many years ago in Laos when I was shot down. And thank you, Jason, for making that connection for me.
Oh, you're more than welcome. And it was very very interesting to hear from his son that his father was like a bigwig, and when he passed away, they had a flyover. So one day I'd like to work with you and his son and kind of do a story about that. That because it is a neat story. It's a completion, right?
Yep, that would be great. So yes, that was my first shoot down in combat. I'd been shot up a bunch of times before that. Pretty intense missions out there over Laos. We generally took fire every single time we went out there, and the missions were daily. So I finished up that tour and was able to get qualified in helicopters. I was a fixed wing only pilot at that time. I found out between my tours that the Army had taken all the guns off of the Mohawks. I enjoyed flying armed Mohawks out there. And so I still wanted to fly something with armament when I was going back on my second tour of duty in Vietnam. So I asked for helicopters and Cobras and was successful. My assignment guys gave me that. Went back to Vietnam on a second tour flying Cobra gunships. And the war was winding down by that point. I went over late 71. But I fought and argued and got assigned to a tactical unit that was still operating. And that was the 361st Aerial Weapons Company, Pink Panthers call sign. And their mission was support to MACV SOG CCC. By the time I got there, the over-the-border missions were terminated, but they were still operating teams up to the border in some very hostile areas still. So I got to support that. And there were occasional over-border missions with teams out of Thailand. And it was shortly after I got there, I was on one of those over-the-border operations to rescue the couple, it was supposed to be a couple survivors from a SOG team out of Thailand, I believe made up of Thai special ops guys. And we got one guy out, but it was that cross-border operation that gave me the qualifications to be a member of the Special Operations Association.
So when you were doing this, and the main point I'm getting to part I'm getting to is when you were flying there, and on the day that you were shot down, like was it from ground fire, like heavy machine gun, or was it where in the chopper were you hit? How much time did you have to land? Those kind of questions.
Okay, yeah, and the day I was shot down, our support to MACV SOG continued December, January, February, and they were training other units, and we continued to do that mission. And then a big enemy offensive started at the end of March 1972, became known as the 1972 Easter Offensive. And our mission then shifted from supporting MACV SOG operations to just being a fire brigade for everything going on in the Central Highlands. The enemy was now upon us and waging this offensive, and we were losing ground rather rapidly. And in fact, by May of 1972, we was just the South Vietnamese Army. There were no U.S. ground forces left in that part of Vietnam at all. It was the South Vietnamese Army. It was Army aviation units. It was some special forces guys, the SOG guys winding down. And then the Air Force still had some assets in country, including forward air controllers. So on the 9th of May, we had lost everything in the Central Highlands except for the city of Pleiku, where we were based out of at Camp Holloway, the city of Kon Tum, the provincial capital just north, and then two border camps. These are old special forces camps near the Cambodian and Laotian border, one at Pali Klang and one up at Ben Het. So it was the camp at Ben Het that I was launched out to lead a flight of Cobras to support the guys on the ground who were surrounded by elements from two North Vietnamese divisions. Now at Ben Het, there were two South Vietnamese Ranger battalions with 2 American advisors. They had thousands of infantry crashing in there. They had 5 tanks through the wire. They're receiving incoming heavy artillery, and they were just trying to survive. They had been mostly overrun, had withdrawn up to their command bunker complex, and were fighting for their lives when we got there. We delivered fires for them. We supported in that same, we made a few turns in combat that day. I think, yeah, 3 turns. We'd expend ordnance, rearm, refuel, go back, expend ordnance, go back, rearm, refuel. On our second turn into combat, we picked up a UH-1, old B model UH-1 that had been retrofitted with a special system on board, and we covered them back up there to Ben Het. It turned out that special system on that UH-1 was the prototype tow missile system, which on that day in that battle with us covering them was the first time the aerial tow missile had ever been used in combat against an active enemy belligerent. So that was quite an honor. They engaged some tanks. We all went back, rearm, refueled. We came up for the 3rd turn that morning, and it was still morning, to find that the guys on the ground were completely out of anti-tank ammunition. They were almost out of small arms ammunition and had requested a resupply. There was a Huey inbound loaded to the gills with ammo, and we were asked if we would cover him inbound. I had a flight of 2 Cobras, myself and my wing. We took up that escort mission, covered that Huey going into Ben Het. The challenge was the weather had been not good to start with, had been deteriorating all morning. We had about a less than 1,000-foot ceiling, completely overcast. So here I am with 3 olive drab Army helicopters that would come in just under that cloud ceiling. And we were facing everything from 51 caliber anti-aircraft machine guns up to 23 millimeter and 37 millimeter that the enemy was employing around Ben Het in that battle. We elected not to come in at that altitude. It would have been nuts. As things turned out, it wasn't too good anyway, but we decided our best bet was to come screaming in at treetop, which we routinely did when we operated with SOG on their missions, and particularly those missions that we went over the border where there was a lot of AAA. We'd come right down on the deck, right on the treetops. So we did that, but instead of setting up our normal racetrack that we did with SOG, we just do an oval and support the Hueys as they came in to either drop off or extract SOG teams. We just decided to make a direct dash in there because there was a lot of enemy. As I said, elements of 2 divisions operating there. It was thick with enemy. So we came in on the treetops, but the Huey in the front, I covered his right side. My wingman was behind me a bit on my left, covering the left side, and we shot a clear path for him in there. He got in, kicked off the ammo, did a pedal turn to come out. We had to turn to continue to cover him and provide fire, but in turning the Cobra, it had to arc up a little bit to make that turn, and as I did, I was engaged with multiple anti-aircraft positions. I know some were 51 caliber, probably 2 or 3 of those, and possibly a 23 millimeter. But I started seeing rounds everywhere I was looking. I could see tracers. The first impact was at the tail of the aircraft, and unlike the small arms fire that I had taken many times, this was different. And this was, I think it was a 51 caliber. I don't think it was 23. I think it was 51. But it felt like some big construction worker had built a scaffolding outside next to the aircraft, and he had a jackhammer out there just starting at the tail of the aircraft and working forward. So I lost directional control. Tail rotor shot up, shot off. I'm not sure. Rounds came up through the engine compartment and the fuel cell. The engine was gone. The aircraft was on fire. It was spinning and burning and coming down from a very low altitude. I did the best. You know, we always question if we did everything that could be done, but I did the best auto rotation I could under the circumstances. We hit nose low on the left side, bounced up, did another spin and a half, and settled in upright, thank goodness. A Cobra is a very narrow aircraft. It's only 36 inches wide, and often when they crash, they'll roll on one side or the other. most often probably. And in doing that, one of the crew members is not going to get out because the front seat canopy opens to the left, the back seat canopy opens to the right, and so one guy's going to be pinned in. They did in the day give us what they called a breakout knife. It was a stubby, heavy-handled knife that was mounted on the dash, and you could supposedly break the plexiglass with it. I don't know. Somebody's probably done that. I didn't know anyone that had, but luckily we settled in upright. Um, I called it the front seat in the aircraft. I just remember just the heat and the flames and everything consuming the cockpit. Made a call to the front seat that we needed to get out of that thing, and he rogered that, and he got out. I got out with much difficulty. Somehow I got my feet were hung up. And I don't remember things clearly because I was hurt bad. I mean, we crashed. I got out. My feet were hung up on something, lap belt cords, and I remember for a time hanging out the side of the aircraft, head down. And then the next thing I remember, some time later, regaining consciousness away from the aircraft, close enough though to feel heat of the explosions and hearing rounds cook off and all of that. So yeah, that's how I got shot down, and I was in pretty bad shape.
Wow. Just to give you a bit of a breathing break. I mean, that when you're retelling that story, I just have this vision of, what else could have gone wrong for you. You've lost all power. You've got rounds coming through there, and I mean, of any aviator, fire is always very high up there for what you don't want to have happen, right? I mean, I know we're going back in history, but where I lived in England, they had a burns ward there, and it was very famous from the World War II Allied, the British, the Canadians, the Australians, and the Kiwis. If they were flying a Spitfire and it got hit, the exhaust in manifold is at the front, and if they went to get out of the cockpit, they would open and the flames would come in and they'd burn their face and their hands. So this hospital that I lived across the road from, they were pioneering in skin grafts, and they called it the guinea pig club, because they were all guys were having their hand attached to their chest, and they would slowly pull it away, and then that growth of new skin would rebuild their nose. I mean, it was yeah.
It's. And I had some burns on the back of my neck. I still have some scars, but thank goodness nothing terribly severe, because it's burn injuries are horrible, and a lot of people don't survive.
So
and one side story, I guess I can tell now. One of the American advisors on the ground there at Ben Head, his name is Mark Truhan, and he lives up in New England. He shared this story with me when I got back. It's in my book, my first book about my that shoot down and about my captivity. After I got back, somehow we got connected, and he said, "Yeah, I know some things about your shoot down, Dave. I have some information about that. I don't know if you want to hear it or not. I understand if you don't, but if you do, let me know." So I did, and he sent me this letter that I still have. And when I got shot down and all that explosion, I was only a few hundred meters outside of their wire. He's up in his command bunker complex, and he can see my crash site.
wow.
And saw me trying to get out of the helicopter, and saw me lay head down, still my feet tangled up in the cockpit. And the story as he relates it, when years before he had seen a semi truck crash somewhere on the New Jersey Turnpike, and watched the truck driver burn to death in the cab of the truck, and it was such a horrible sight. He wasn't going to let that happen to me, so he raised his weapon and took a bead on me, and was going to put me out of my misery before I suffered being burned to death. And he said just before he squeezed the trigger, he paused for just a moment, and in that pause, he describes that the cockpit was obscured by smoke, and when the smoke cleared, I was gone. So yeah. And that's not my recollection, that's his story. So it's documented.
Wow. Yeah. And so I know this part of the interview, I mean, it gets to be a bit not very pleasant. So you're basically you're half you're half with it. You're able to get yourself off the ground, and then how much longer is it, before the enemy troops, get you, or come to you and chew hoy, whatever.
There's a couple things at play here. Yeah, I was hurt badly. As I said, was burned on the back of my neck. I had shell fragment wounds in my right ankle. I had head wounds that I guess, weren't that serious, but head wounds bleed a lot, so I'm
Yeah.
with blood, and my back hurt. Now I didn't find out till I got released that my back was badly fractured, and in fact, I came home an inch and a half shorter than I went over because of this back fracture. So there I am with a broken back, wounded ankle, burns in the back of my neck, bleeding face and head wounds, laying next to the helicopter, and I couldn't move at all for some time. I don't know how long. I kept coming in and out of consciousness. At first, I didn't know where I was. At first, I was reflecting back that I'd just been shot down in a Mohawk and was laying somewhere in Laos, and so it took me a little while to get my wits back about me. Uh, I couldn't move, but eventually, with much effort, I was able to get my arms moving and my legs and get up on my hands and knees and crawl around. Um, and I tried to find my front seater once I remembered where I was and what had actually happened, and spent quite a time crawling around that aircraft looking for Tim. Tim Connery was the name of my front seater. We never did get together. I never did find him. Enemy was moving all around the area. More support aircraft were coming in. There were jet fighters bombing. Spectre came in, AC-130 started shooting. In my mind, I needed to get away from that crash site. Saw two possibilities. The first possibility, I could see the hill, and that's where the good guys were. And it was just a few hundred yards away, as I said. All I would have to do to get to friendlies and be safe was get through thousands of attacking enemy infantry, get through all those fire bases had concertina wire all around them. Between the rows of concertina wire were anti-personnel mines or anti-tank mines. So I'd have to get through all of that, and at the same time hope that the good guys saw that I was indeed a good guy and not one of the attacking enemy. And even in my terrible mental state, I figured that was a no-go. So the plan I developed was I was going to try to get back to near Khartoum, which was the nearest friendly place still in friendly hands. And that was about 40 miles away. And I thought, and I was, a young man, 26 years old, had been an athlete in school, and there was no doubt in my mind that I could make that some way, somehow. And by then I was able to get up on my, stand up a little bit, all hunched over and hobble along. So that was my plan. There was no official rescue attempt made. And I will caveat that in a moment. But the reason was my shoot down, let's see, it was the 9th of May, 1972. I don't remember exactly when that A6 incident took place, EA6 up just north of the DMZ. Oh, shoot, now I'm not going to remember the name of it. There was a movie made out of it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Night of the Intruder? No.
No,
Oh,
that was a
oh, you mean the one, the one where
yeah, and there was the one
G-
systems operator survived, Lieutenant Colonel, and he used golf course
Templeton?
terminology to bring in the rescues. Oh, I'll think of it while we're talking. But at any rate, that had happened, and there were a ton of American aircraft shot down, people killed, and everything, trying to get that one guy out of there. And up until that time, the U.S. position had been, hey, whatever it takes, we'll get in and get somebody out. After that happened, the U.S. position changed that, hey, we got to make a reasonable risk assessment. Does it make sense to try and get in and get somebody? Boy, I'm going to think of the name of that. I got the book on my shelf somewhere. So there was that, and then that, I'm sure, weighed on the decision maker in the Central Highlands at the time was a civilian. Interestingly, he was a former military guy named John Paul Vann. And John Paul Vann was in charge of everything taking place in Tukor. He was up on the air as all that happened, or shortly after, and he made the decision there'd be no rescue attempt mounted to come in there and get me out. because it was just too hazardous. And I think, all these years I've thought about it, I think it was the right decision. We didn't need to lose a bunch of people trying to get in there and send teams on the ground and all. However, with all of that said, Army helicopter pilots are Army helicopter pilots. And the guys in my unit and the guys in B Troop 717th Cav that was also at Camp Holloway decided they were going to go out on a mission that they justified as being just an armed recon out in the AO. And they went out on this armed recon and got up to my crash site right at dusk. And I heard, and in fact, it was just getting dark. It was just getting good and dark. My radio didn't work for whatever reason. But I heard a flight of aircraft come in, sounded like some Cobras. I heard what sounded like a little bird, an OH-6, come down to the ground, pause momentarily, and lift back up, and they all went out. And so I figured that my front seats radio probably did work, and they probably got in and got Tim out and got him rescued. Now, another side, I don't want to do too many side stories, or we'll be 2 hours just telling this whole capture incident.
Just to pause you there, so if people were thinking I was being rude and looking at my cell phone, I wasn't texting my wife. I was actually looking at the movie. So Bat 21.
Bat 21. That's it. Yeah. Bat 21.
And so that was that starred Gene Hackman and Danny Glover, and that was yes, Colonel Isil, I think that's how you pronounce it, Hamilton, and he was privy to some really top secret stuff.
Right. That's why they wanted to get him out.
Yeah. And the interesting side note to that is that he was there was a Navy SEAL that actually rescued him with a
Vietnamese SEAL.
Vietnamese SEAL as well. Now they were with SOG at that time. That was a SOG mission. So anyway, sorry to interrupt you, but I didn't want to go, I'm sure there'd be 100 people going, it's Bat 21, Jason. 21.
No.
So now we have that.
Yeah, Bat 21, exactly.
Yeah.
And and so it was special ops that got in and got him out after, and we suffered dearly. I ended up later in POW camp with a couple guys off that mission that were captured trying to get him out of there. One Air Force OV-10 pilot, and one Army door gunner on a Huey that was shot down, who was the only survivor from the Huey. Yeah, so we lost a lot of folks. Yeah, so that had a bearing on the decisions that were made not to come in to try to rescue me. But as I said, a little like, I hate to call it an illegal mission, but an unsanctioned mission. I got in and got my front seat out. They had seen Tim, because apparently he got out of the aircraft, got some distance away, and had collapsed in a bomb crater. So they had seen him during the daylight. They knew where he was, and they went in to get him. I had been hiding from the enemy and moving and evading, and so they didn't know where I was. In fact, I heard them come in, and I got my strobe light out. In fact, I've been using a signal mirror during the day, but the enemy had captured tons of signal mirrors, and that was never a good
like one of those.
Oh yes, so there it is. So those strobe lights, the worry was that when you turn them on, they start flashing. They look like enemy gun flashes. So to prevent that, we concocted a little blue cellophane thing that would go over the top of it, so it would look blue instead of white and would not be confused with muzzle flashes.
Makes sense.
I got my strobe light out. I'm gimping along. I had barely gotten up on my feet to hobble. I turned on my strobe light. I held it up, and the lead Cobra swung around and opened fire on me with his turret.
Are you serious?
I talked to the guy after we got back, Bentley Hill. He's now passed away, but I talked to him after I returned, and he was in that lead Cobra front seat firing the turret. And he said, "Oh yeah, we went in there. We got Tim. We were taking fire from all over the place." And okay. I said, "Thanks, Bentley." So the minigun came close. Luckily, didn't hit me. But I dropped the strobe light. I fall back to the ground. I roll over into the bush, and I'm laying there. That stupid strobe light still going ding, ding, ding. I turned that off. And after all that effort, all day long to get movement in my legs, get crawling, get up hobbling, I had to go through all that again to get back up and get moving again. And so there's that and several other incidents that occurred in my evasion, which lasted for 3 days.
Oh, wow.
Guys in my unit were still out looking around, but again, no formal American rescue launched.
And
And on the third day, I'm crashing down the side of a hill, moving to the southeast, trying to make my way to Khartoum. I'd you'd think there's plenty of water in the jungle. There's really not. I was really thirsty. I'd come across streams and try to drink. Most of that water just tasted like core gunpowder. It was because of the B. Oh, then they started putting in B-52 strikes too. So we got all this going on to save the guys at Ben Head. And I would say the mission, tragic as it was, because Tim Connery, I can say that now, I guess, did not survive. He was alive when they picked him up. I took that shell fragment in the ankle, and the Cobra, the front seat sits a little bit lower. So he probably took some direct rounds. He suffered damage in the crash from the gun sight and all. So he was picked up. I'm still, in fact, I've become very good friends with the scout pilot that rescued him and picked him up. Who is sad to this day that Tim didn't survive. He got into the hospital, and the doc looked at him and said, "No, he's gone." So at any rate, yeah, third day, I'm crashing through the jungle, trying to get down to Khartoum. Water was a problem. Couldn't drink out of the streams. I'd get water sometimes and it rained all the time. I was soaking wet. I was cold. Even in the heat of the jungle, I'd still get cold, and especially at night, drinking water that collected on the tops of leaves. And I knew I had to eat. I ate some leaves of a plant that was prevalent in the area after I did my little sampling of a small bit to be sure it didn't taste too bitter, and then a little more to be sure I didn't get sick. And then I was gobbling up those leaves. And I would also, there were ant mounds all over the jungle. I'd put my hand down on an ant mound, let ants crawl over the back of my hand and lick the ants off. And I figured that between the leaves and the ants, that was enough food that I could make it the 40 miles to Khartoum. But on the third day, coming down the side of a hill, I encountered a group of enemy soldiers. 5 young guys were down filling some canteens at a stream that I couldn't see or hear. The jungle's thick as anything. When you say kind of casually, say, "Oh, you couldn't see your hand in front of your face." Well, I mean, some of those branches and bushes, I couldn't. But they heard me before I saw or heard them. Quickly surrounded me. And pointed their weapons at me and motioned for me to stand up. And they were barking a bunch of crap at me in Vietnamese that I couldn't understand. But yeah, they had me.
so that must be. I mean, I can see by your eyes that even though that you've told this story probably 1,000 times, there's still these mental bookmarks that take you back to those events. So I really appreciate you sharing this with us. And I mean, the detail in which you're telling us, I mean, it really is building a photo or like a movie in my head. And I really can't think if your days there could have been any worse. I mean, like that's, now you've got the fear of you're now in the hands of the enemy. Are they going to shoot me? Are they going to beat me to death? What are they going to do with me? Am I going to am I going to make it out alive here? So, I mean, I can't imagine what goes through your mind. I mean, you're in probably agonizing pain. They're telling you to get up off the ground. You can figure that out from them raising their guns at you. And so I would assume that they took you to their CO.
Yeah, and interesting. Those were exactly my thoughts. I didn't know because of what I had been through physically and just all over those days. And I was a freaking mess. I because of my broken back, I had no control of my bowels or bladder, and I'd been peeing and crapping all over myself all those days. Blood caked, dirt. I was a mess. 3 days. I have a pretty heavy growth of whiskers, even when I was younger, and yeah, 3 day growth of beard, mud, blood. I had leeches that I had pulled off my body that you pick up in the jungle, but there were still some, I guess, on my face and one hanging out of my nose that they ripped off later. But yeah, in that instant, so I'm just kind of numb. And yeah, was I going to die? Well, maybe, and I could have died all those days leading up to that. And there were several other things those 3 days I didn't relate, but some
Yeah.
near-death experiences, almost getting captured, almost getting killed from bomb strikes. And now these guys capture me. And yeah, those thoughts were there. Are they going to shoot me now? Am I going to get? What's going to happen? But I don't want to say, and don't, sometimes you lack for words to describe things. It's not that I didn't care, it's that I didn't care. It was the whole world just seemed to be this numb thing around me, and what was going to happen was going to happen. And I'd had some discussions in prayer too, which kind of put everything, I can only control what I can control, and all
Yeah.
this other stuff. What's going to happen is going to happen, and I'm not going to worry about it. Maybe a comment too for anybody watching the podcast that is, combat experience or bad things happening. Yeah, this is difficult to go back and relate and talk about. At the same time, it's helpful to go back and talk about. Uh, and I found over the years, in fact, talking to mental health professionals, that when you have guys that have PTSD or any kind of bad experience, the very best thing you can do is to talk about and share those experiences. Now, I didn't want to do that at all when I first got back, and I guess probably most people don't. And part of the reason is you don't think anybody, what am I going to tell people? They're not going to understand. They didn't go through this. They're not going to be able to relate. That really doesn't matter. I mean, they do care and they are interested. So be it your girlfriend, your parents, your spouse, whoever, uh, just take time and tell them what happened, and you'll help yourself. I've talked about this stuff a lot over the years. I wrote the book. I'll say to get into the detail that I needed to write the book was painful. And it did cause me to go back and I'd start having nightmares again at night and all the bad dreams. And I'd be very unsettled because to get enough detail to fill in a whole book, you got to really, I had to relive all those experiences in detail. And generally, it'd be night after night after night to get enough detail. And okay, now I can get this in the book. But I'm rambling on, but it is helpful to talk. Any combat issues, if you can find someone to talk to, that will be helpful.
And you did also mention in the first interview or podcast that we did, it was when you turned to your wife and you said, I don't know if I can go through this and finish it. This is just too painful. And your wife was your rock and said, Bill, you need to carry this on. You need to finish this, right?
Yep. Yep, she did. Yeah, I was ready to stop the book. I started the book. I got home. It was about to this point of my writing, and yeah, I came back in that night and said, Melanie, I'm done. I'm finished with this thing. Why is that? So this is nothing but a series of unfortunate events. Who the hell's going to want to read this? And yeah, she encouraged me. Said, well, yeah, you need to tell the whole story. So in that, I do. I tell everything that happened, and then in the book, I go into the issues and problems I had when I got back and the things I faced and how I overcame them. And this whole thing about being able to talk, I bring out in the book too. And I'll just very, very briefly now, after I got back, didn't want to talk to anybody. I was in the hospital in Denver, Colorado, Fitzsimmons Army Medical Center. And the protocol was we'd do 2 weeks in the hospital, go out on a month's convalescent leave, and then be returned to duty. Right when we were getting ready to be released from the hospital, I had a relapse in malaria. I had 3 different kinds of malaria. I had a relapse. All the former prisoners got released. I got stuck staying in the hospital for more malaria treatments. Pretty sick for a couple of days. As I was recovering, the public affairs guy came in. Well, it was actually a young enlisted man from the public affairs office. And he said, hey, sir, we got a request for a former prisoner to speak at a group in downtown Denver. Can you do that for us? I said, no way. I don't want to talk to anybody about anything. I just leave me alone. The next day, the public affairs officer himself, I think it was an Army major, came in and said, hey, I'm so-and-so public. Hey, look, guy, I talked to your guy yesterday, and I told him, no, I don't want to do it. He said, I just wanted to come talk to you myself. He said, the group is the survivors of Bataan and Corregidor. They really want a former, a returned Vietnam prisoner. You're the only guy left in the hospital. Everybody else is gone. And I thought for a second, I said, geez, the survivors of Bataan and Corregidor, what do they want to hear from me? They said, and so I said, I can't say no to those guys. So I did go to their little group meeting there in Denver, walked in very uncomfortably, found the guy in charge and said, yeah, here I am. What do you want? He said, just share your story with us. And I did, and they asked questions. We had a good conversation, and I felt good about it. But that incident with the survivors of Bataan and Corregidor is what brought me out of my shell and got me talking. And that was the best thing mentally that happened to me. Yeah.
And just as we're on this path, and we'll go back to the actual events of Vietnam. Did you? I would imagine that you had a lot of dark moments. You had a lot of times that you felt very low. But did you also experience, anger issues, and you didn't want to be around people who weren't, former combat? Like, did you feel more that your family was in the military and you didn't want to go out into the civilian world and talk to people because they just wouldn't understand?
Yes and no. I mean, socially, I didn't want to, yeah, I wasn't keen to do much of anything socially. The speaking things I became happy to do. And I talked to high school groups and service organizations and communities and the like. Yeah, some of my biggest issues too much drinking, too much working, being too demanding of those around me, seeking perfection in everything. In combat, you got to be right at your sharpest, as sharp as you can be just to survive. You got to do everything perfectly. You got to do it right and no screw ups, because screw ups, you die. That attitude in combat, coupled with time in captivity, you had to stay. For me, I had to stay as optimistic as I could, as hopeful as possible. I refused to let myself get down and depressed in captivity. I always tried to have a good attitude, not a bad attitude, because the guys that I saw with bad attitudes, that weren't optimistic, that didn't maintain hope, they died. They didn't survive. So now all that transfers in. I'm back. I'm home. I must have made my life miserable on my poor first wife, just the way that I was, because that was my attitude, and it wasn't too pleasant for her, I'm sure. So yeah, I face those issues. I think, yeah, and I haven't really thought to categorize the issues I face, so I go through most of them in the book. But I think it would be too demanding of those around me. So no patience, and just being a perfect ass all the time. As closer I thought, sure, people looked at me and said, what is with this guy? That to excessive drinking, and then just I lost myself. That's where I drew my, I don't know, strength or whatever. My survival was just work, just get into my work and spend all kinds of time working. I did, I think, I hope, but that might have taken some time to get there. I did try to carve out time to do things with my two young kids, and that was helpful. Yeah.
Thank you again for sharing. I mean, the reason that I wanted to go there, even though it's not very comfortable, it's like I think it's important that people realize that. I mean, I think many of the World War II guys that I've spoken to who were in combat, drinking was a big part of their coming home and dealing with that. So it's good. Thank you for sharing that. So if you just want to give a timeline, I don't, you needn't get into too much detail, but so you now are in the company of these enemy soldiers. And you were taken to various POW camps, right? More than one. So can we just do a timeline on that? Like where, you don't have to go into great detail, but just just a little bit, because you did wind up where I want to head with this is you wound up at probably the most well-known POW camp or building in all the Vietnam War. And then you actually met two SOG guys. So that's where I'm heading with this.
Okay, let's go there. Let's go quickly through the timeline, and we'll get there. Yeah, and just very briefly, you asked me if they took me to when I was captured, the commander. They took me to a camp. It turned out to be a big assembly area where there are hundreds of soldiers collected with stuff for the attack. I don't know that I met a commander. I met eventually later that afternoon what I think is an intel officer who put me through 3 days of interrogation and increasingly brutal treatment. to include having my arms tied behind my back. And as I'd be interrogated, they'd pull the ropes tighter and tighter until eventually my elbows touched and both shoulders dislocated. Um, a lot of beatings, threatened execution, and then marched. And then they gave me my boots back with no laces, no socks, marched for 3 days through the jungle into northern Cambodia to my first regular POW camp. That was a jungle camp with cages, I don't know, much like what you see in some of these I don't know, depictions of what things were like for prisoners. None of that existed in the north, but it sure did exist in the jungles of the south where I was captured. So I was in a cage with my feet in wooden stocks and existed like that for several weeks. Broken back, I couldn't lay back. I had to sit up all the time, 24 hours a day. We were only allowed out of the cage a few minutes a day to use the camp latrine facility. And so if your schedule didn't match that few minutes a day, and the latrine facility was a mound of crap in the corner of the camp that you had to go walk up into and squat and do your business. If your schedule didn't match that, then you just messed in the cage, and it was awful. People dying every day. The prisoners, it was about 300 prisoners in that jungle camp, mostly all, or they were all South Vietnamese and Montagnards. There was only one other American in the camp, Wayne Finch. After several weeks, Wayne and I were put in a group of 25 South Vietnamese officers, all prisoners, and marched north, a group of about a dozen guards, before we reached, and we didn't know where we're going. We thought we were going they told us 11 days to a new camp, and we thought it was somewhere else in the jungle. They said the treatment would be better. All we got to eat was a grapefruit-sized ball of rice in the morning and a grapefruit-sized ball of rice in the afternoon in the jungle camp and on the journey north. The trip ended up over 3 months long. Walked all the way up the Ho Chi Minh Trail into North Vietnam. Walked and took trucks a couple of days inside North Vietnam until we got to Hanoi. Along the way, 6 of the South Vietnamese prisoners died or were executed for not being able to keep up. The other American, Wayne Finch, died. I survived and made it to Hanoi. Got the first camp that I arrived in was one called Plantation Gardens. There was nothing really garden-like about it, but I was there for a time. Our group in Plantation Gardens were all prisoners captured in South Vietnam or Laos. In fact, through the whole captivity, we were always kept segregated from the guys that were captured in the north, because we were, by the facade, the political facade of the war, we were prisoners of the Viet Cong, the Provisional Revolutionary Government of the South, these Viet Cong guerrillas. No explanation then of why we were being held in prisons in the capital city of Hanoi in the north. And I didn't see a Viet Cong. I was captured by regular NVA forces in the south and transported on. Okay, so Plantation Gardens first. In December of 1972, when the peace negotiations hit a stumbling block, Nixon unleashed waves of B-52 strikes on Hanoi. Became known as the Christmas bombing in 1972. In the middle of that, they picked us up in trucks late one night and moved us around for about an hour, and then ended up a place just not that far from where we were, unloaded us, and one of the old timers looked up and said, this is the Hilton. So they moved us into the Hanoi Hilton. So that is my, that's the timeline of prison camps that got me to the Hilton. So the other SOG guys that I ran into were 2 of them. One you were aware of, Caviani, who received the Medal of Honor for his actions that led up to his capture during the siege of Quezon, and spent time with him in the camp. He was doing. None of us knew it at the time, but it all came out at the end. He had been in conversation with our senior ranking officer, Air Force Lieutenant Colonel Ted Guy, and was decided that Caviani would move in with a group called the Peace Committee, which were mostly, well, they're all young soldiers who were swayed by the communist propaganda and were doing things for the enemy in the way of making radio broadcasts and statements and all this kind of stuff. And they received special treatment, special food, packages. They're part of the compound. We could see over a wall. There was a basketball hoop. They'd play volleyball and all of that. But anyway, Caviani went down to get some dirt on those guys and keep an eye on them. but very legitimately a Medal of Honor winner. SOG guy came out at the end of the war. The other guy who you weren't familiar with before was a very interesting non-commissioned officer, Ed Flora. His full name was Carroll Edward Flora. He has since passed away too, as is Caviani. It's a shame we're losing so many of these guys. Flora had been on a team, as I recall his conversations. It was a team out of CCN on a recon team mission. They'd gotten picked up, and he was in a McGuire rig or something, hanging under a helicopter, and somehow fell off from like 100 feet or something, and he was presumed dead. But he had survived his fall and was captured. And as I recall, these are long ago memories. It was his right arm, but his arm had been so badly broken that it came down from the elbow and then did about a 45-degree angle from the fracture and had healed. And he grabbed great joy out of doing a salute with his arm all screwed up. And he had declared that when he got released, he wasn't going to get that fixed. He was going to keep that bent arm for salutes. But I think he did have surgery and got it all squared away. He died at a fairly young age after we got back. So those were the two special ops, or the SOG related special ops guys. Because I think Caviani was doing SOG related work when he was captured, and I know that Flora was. We had other special forces guys that were prisoners of war. Just to very briefly mention two, because they are just great individuals. One of them has passed away. It was a team of Dennis Thompson and Harvey Brand. And there were two other guys also captured there. They were captured at Long Bay Special Forces Camp when it was overrun in 1967, I believe. And there was a book written about that called Night of the Silver Stars. And they suffered horribly. When Dennis was captured, he was standing, I think he said, like knee deep in bodies and blood when the enemy finally caught up with him and captured him. So yeah, those are. Oh, and then the other special forces guy I have to mention. Geez, I almost forgot. How could I? Was another Thompson, Floyd J. Thompson, Jim Thompson. He was the longest prisoner of war, I think, still in American history. And he didn't get credit at all during the Vietnam War. During most of the war and for many months and some years after, the guy that was credited as being the longest held prisoner of war in Vietnam was Lieutenant Alvarez, who was a Navy pilot who was shot down the first day of the bombing after the Tonkin Gulf incident in August of '64. But Thompson had been shot down months earlier in April. Shot down. He was the Special Forces commander of the Special Forces detachment at Quezon back in 1964. Wow. And he went for a reconnaissance flight in the back seat of a bird dog flown by an Air Force pilot, and they got shot down. The pilot was killed, and Thompson was captured. So Thompson had several months longer in captivity than Alvarez. Another Special Forces guy. I think that's all the Special Forces guys. Bill McMurray was another one captured at Long Bay. I think those are all the Special Forces guys I need to mention.
So when you're a POW, I mean, in your case, is the enemy getting you to do yard work or like to work in the garden or like to grow things, or are they like what? And also, I think I did ask you this in your email. In an email between you and I, did you ever meet a Vietnamese, North Vietnamese that could speak English? And I think you said yes, didn't you? Or
yeah, the guy that interrogated me first when I was first captured, and it took hours for them to get him there. I was captured, I think, in the morning, and he got there in the late afternoon on that first day, and he spoke fairly good English. And that's why I thought he was an intel officer. I didn't understand the accoutrements on their uniforms at all at that time. And then the other guy that spoke English was in that jungle camp I was in Cambodia. My interrogator spoke English about like I speak Spanish, or at least I spoke Spanish from high school, high school language. That was it. He was very difficult sessions with him. And then he ended up, when I went north, he was the guard that was most closely affiliated with me, was that one guy, because he spoke a little bit of English. Others didn't. In Hanoi, Yeah, a couple of the guards spoke just a few words of English, but I don't remember anybody speaking much. Now, the interrogators did when we go in, and the interrogation sessions in Hanoi ended up being more in the jungle, they were interrogation. In Hanoi, it was more indoctrination sessions than interrogation. By the time I got up there, it was mostly to feed their line of garbage and try to get me to cooperate. When I first got to the plantation gardens, I was in solitary confinement. They brought me in for interrogation, and their whole effort was to try and get me. They said, "Hey, we have guys that do this radio program for us and all, and we really like you to do that." And no, I don't want anything to do with any of that. And then they just try and brainwash you over time.
And so when you have this second meeting and they're trying to get you to do all the anti-US bombing and how this is wrong and all the rest of that, are they putting like fresh food on the table, or Bill, would you like a nice glass of water or some fresh fruit or something? Are they trying to that good cop bad cop? Are they trying to brainwash you? Hey, life could be so much easier for you if you had only joined the Peace Corps. Your fellow airmen are out there playing basketball right now.
Exactly. Yeah, if you will cooperate, then you
Yeah.
will get the full deserved humane and lenient treatment, they would call it. You get the humane and lenient treatment if you will just be cooperative, just cooperate. Yeah, I don't remember food. Yeah, food would have been nice, but I remember even in the jungle, those sessions, and then in Hanoi, it was tea and cigarettes. You get a nice cup of tea and cigarettes as long as you would, if you would do anything. And
And
then I
I'm
got a promise of toothpaste in the jungle. I never saw the toothpaste.
and I'm sure that they're telling you, Bill, the U.S. government doesn't care about you. They're not coming for you. They're just an individual. They don't care if you're here forever. And I'm sure that must get into your head where you're going, or I know I've seen other things where like maybe your wife now is at home. Maybe she's talking to your neighbor. Wouldn't you like to be at home? Like it could all be over for you.
They do all that. They do all
Yeah.
that. They try one in the jungle. Well, I guess both places. I don't remember so much writing. In the jungle, they tried to get us to write things too. And I never gave them anything that they could use. Yeah, no, they tried all that. Um, and that's why, communications is so important for prisoners. You draw such strength out of being connected to other Americans. And in the prisons, they had the tap code, which the Army in those days, we didn't have a survival school. We didn't learn any of that stuff. I didn't learn the tap code till after I finally got in with other prisoners in a cell. But yeah, once you can get with other Americans, once communication gets going, our senior officer, as I mentioned, Colonel Ted Guy, he put out directives and guidance. It was all very good and all gave us a strength and helped us resist.
I mean, one important thing is that we talked about on email too, is that for the public, they may not realize that if you're in a POW camp, that the ranks still apply, and the highest ranking officer is still your commanding officer. And you
Yes.
can just go, you know what, buddy? Screw you. The war's over for me. You're still in the army, right?
Yep. Yeah, and you would think that you'd get court-martialed if you didn't follow directions. And we all did, and not so much because we worried that there'd be some discipline if we didn't. It's we yearned for that command and control, that chain of command. It gave us strength and made us feel good. All the enlisted guys, particularly, they weren't, "Oh, you officers can't tell us what to do, or prisoners." No, everyone wanted this solid, strong chain of command. That's how we worked. That's how we functioned. That's how we survived, except for those 8 guys, 10 guys that were in the peace committee. That's they demonstrate exactly what you said. Oh, screw off! We're not listening to you. We're doing this, and we're making statements. We all thought that those guys had rot in prison after we got back, but they didn't. There were some decisions made at the highest national levels that no prisoners would be prosecuted. We all suffered, and so the rest of us prisoners would have loved to have seen them go to jail.
I'm
Yeah,
sure.
when we got released, Colonel Guy put out an order and very firmly directed us to obey. He said, "I don't want any of you guys doing anything to any member of the peace committee." So I'm going to take care of it. And he did bring charges against him, which were dropped. Then another one of our guys, Ed Leonard, also then brought charges against him that were dropped. So none of those guys were prosecuted.
So just a couple more questions about being a POW. Was there like did you trade? I mean, I'm sure you didn't have much there to trade, but was there a kind of internal black market? Maybe a guy might have an extra cigarette, and well, what are you going to trade for me? I mean, or were there any guards that would facilitate that? Or
Yeah, and in the jungle and journeying north, um, I don't know that I ever saw a friendly guard. I saw a lot of guards that hated our guts, a lot of guards that treated us badly, but occasionally you'd see a guard that I think had some empathy for the, I mean, we were near death, and they'd give us a little bit of tobacco. And so we get little bits of tobacco. We get somehow, some way, some little pieces of paper and roll it and bum a light. In fact, I think I remember the Vietnamese said, for a light for a little bit of tobacco we had. So we could scrounge some tobacco. In Hanoi, yeah, I don't remember. Not from the guards. We got a ration of tobacco or cigarettes in Hanoi, I think, and it wasn't much. It was a little bit, and a couple guys didn't smoke, so we'd trade off with them. Uh, I traded. Was that wasn't cigarettes? We got a special Christmas dinner. Usually we just get a plate of pumpkin soup or cabbage or something, and a little bit of stale French bread for a meal. But at Christmas, they had a special meal. I think we're in the bombing too. We had dug a trench in our cell at the plantation gardens to get below the surface where the B-52 strikes were going. But I forget what we got in the special meal. Some little piece of some little sweet thing or something. And I had my best buddy in prison camp, Al Kroboth. He was a big 6'5" basketball player for the Citadel. I traded him a little piece of this, whatever this sweet was, for a steak dinner. And so I said, Al, you gonna eat? Yeah. I said, hey, if you give me that, I'll buy you a steak dinner when we get back. So that was the trade we made there. And I did. He was in New Jersey. I got myself up there and took him out and bought him a steak dinner.
Well, that's cool. So when the war was officially over, I mean, how does that work? Did the commanding officer of the POW camp say, "Okay, gentlemen, the war is officially over. You still have to stay in your camp. There'll be like a liaison person here, and please keep an orderly fashion." Or I mean, how does that work?
No liaison, no Red Cross. The peace agreements were signed on January 17th, 1973. By the terms of the peace agreement, the communists had to tell us about it. They're supposed to read it, I think. So the camp commander of the Hanoi Hilton called us group by group, but again, we never mixed or mingled with the guys captured in the north. He called our group of South Vietnam and Laotian prisoners out into our little courtyard and had the agreements and had them read to us in English. I don't think he may have read them, maybe somebody else read them. They had a bunch of TV cameras and things around, or film cameras around to get our reaction. Colonel Guy had put out an edict before we fell out in that formation of nobody show any emotion at all, just stand there. So we did. So he read the peace agreements, and the provisions were we were all to be released over the next 60 days or 90 days, January, February, March. I think over the next 60 days, the releases were supposed to take place and go back to your cells. And so life continued almost normally. I think we got more time outside from our cells. The conditions were relaxed. The food improved dramatically from this slop we were getting. They started giving us some fruits. I think we got some bananas. We got more and better French breads. We got cans of meat. Who knows what the meat was? It was cans of meat. We'd never seen anything like that before in captivity. And we got more cigarettes. And yeah, it was much improved, but we were still in our cells, still being treated about the same all the way up until release. The releases started, January 7th, I think early February were the first releases. I ended up in one of the very last releases. It was the last release from, this was the facade continued. They had releases from the government of North Vietnam, released groups of prisoners, and some of the releases still in the same manners. We'd still leave the Hanoi Hilton. We'd still have the buses to Gilam Airport. We'd still get on a U.S. Air Force C-141 medevac airplane, but we were being released by the Provisional Revolutionary Government. So if you look today at the manifest for the flights coming out of Hanoi, there's flights from the Democratic Republic of Vietnam, and there's flights from the Provisional Revolutionary Government. I was on the last Viet Cong released group that came out of Hanoi, and it was one of the very last. There were a couple of other releases after mine of guys from the North Vietnamese government and the Laotian. One was supposedly from the Laotian government, but they were prisoners captured in Laos who were with us in Hanoi.
All kind of smoke and mirrors, for their, that they're all good people, right? They're all of your new friends. It's funny, I see that we've gone past the hour limit that I try and stick to, but we'll just talk for maybe 5 more minutes. And I think three quick questions. And one is not a question, one is more a statement. For the viewers that don't know your history, which is all over, YouTube with Jocko and other people that you've talked to, you stayed in to the U.S. Army, and I mean, you're still somewhat involved. I mean, you can go back and talk to the people there if you need to. But when did you? I mean, the joke between you and your wife is that you will retire this year, right? But like, when did you when did you last put on your actual dress blues?
Oh God, the last time I had my uniform on was when my young son graduated from Gonzaga University in ROTC and was commissioned as a lieutenant, and then he got married then too. And so I wore my my uniform to commission him. And that's been, God, he's 33 years old now. So that was a while back. It's been more than a decade since I had a uniform on. Yeah.
And when was the last time that you flew a plane?
Oh, that I piloted a plane? Oh,
Yeah.
okay. July of 2023.
Oh, so not too long ago.
I flew a Huey and I flew a OH-6 Scout. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. There's a guy here in Southern Washington who has some aircraft that he maintains in the Vietnam era appearance, and he supports veterans activities. He's a great guy, but every once in a while I'm able to get down there and fly one of his helicopters. It's a really super experience. Yeah. So.
Wow, I'm sure that brought back some memories. I mean, just smelling that jet fuel, I'm sure was like,
yeah. Oh, it's wonderful. It's wonderful. I've done that a few times over the years. Yeah, great experience. What else was I? There was something else I wanted to. Oh, well, I don't remember. Oh, I cringed at. Yeah, I think I told you before. I was retiring at the end of 2024. That was it. I've continued. My work has been with NATO Special Operations Forces of late. Nothing that well, some of it's been fun. I was going to say nothing that exotic, but it's been interesting. Yeah, I keep trying to bow out. I guess I should feel good. Many people get older and they can't find work. I turn 80 this year, and
wow.
these guys coerced me into. But I'm only going to do a little bit. But I'm going to stay on. 2025 is going to be the last year. I'm going to do maybe a couple of special projects with these guys over the year ahead, and that is it. I mean, we all should reach a point where we just kick back and relax. So I will do that. Yep. And I'm continuing to write. I've got my 3 books written. Can I plug my books?
You can do whatever you want, sir.
Here, how did I do this? There's 3 books. But at any rate, the one we're talking about today was mostly Through the Valley, my captivity in Vietnam. That's about the whole capture thing.
Right.
This one is about another extraordinary Special Forces officer that was before I was captured, a big battle at Firebase Charlie. He got the Medal of Honor for that battle that wasn't awarded till 2022.
Wow.
And my book had nothing to do with him getting the Medal of Honor, but that was also published in 2022, and that's a hell of a story about that battle. I supported that flying Cobra attack helicopters in support, so I'm a little bit connected to it.
Cool.
And then my last book, this is the one we were talking about that I showed last time. That's about my Mohawk tour, first tour of duty. So,
and where can the people find these books?
Amazon. That's the easiest. Just go up on Amazon. You can go to in fact, I would encourage people, I like to support my local bookstore. You go to your local bookstore and order them. But if you want to get the information about the book, the author is me, William Reeder Jr., and those 3 titles should be anywhere on Amazon. You can find it and either order it right from Amazon or march down to your local bookstore and say, hey, can you get these for me?
So what is, now that we're in 2025, what are do you have any more plans to write another book, or like what would you like to do?
I'm deep into another book already.
Good.
Um,
Good.
I'm done with Vietnam.
Okay.
And this is not Special Forces connected, but I'm writing a book about the 24th Infantry Division in Operation Desert Storm, the first Gulf War in Iraq and Saudi, kicking the Iraqis out of Kuwait when they invaded Kuwait. Yeah.
And were you there?
No, I wasn't there. I wish that I had been there for my full colonel brigade command, 06 level full colonel command. I got put into the Apache training brigade at Fort Hood, Texas. And I would have rather been in a tactical unit off fighting that war at that time. And I fought hard to get unleashed from the or released from the training brigade and get a tactical brigade. But every general officer I talked to, when I ranted and raved and said, I've got more combat experience than anybody else on this command list, the answer consistently was, and that is why you need to be training those guys and sending them over there. So that's what I did. No, my connection is only that the guy that commanded the 24th Division, and I picked the 24th Division because I don't know if you remember in that war there was this big encirclement maneuver out in the western desert that General Schwarzkopf came up with, and at the spear point of that encirclement was the 24th Division, and it became known as the left hook. So the 24th Division was at the spearhead of that left hook, with the 101st Airborne doing air mobile operations in support of them. So it was an attractive operation to write about. And the guy that commanded the 24th Division is one General retired Barry McCaffrey. And I was his chief of staff when he commanded U.S. Southern Command. So I know him. We are connected.
Well, that's
And
good.
he has connected me with, I've interviewed just about every single person that was in a leadership position in that division as I'm writing the story. And it's just it's awesome. I think it's going to be a good story.
And I guess just as a final note, should anybody have any information about the book that you're writing, they can definitely contact me on YouTube, and I can put them in touch with you. You never know. You never know who's out there, as we found out, right?
No, you do, and I've it's been quite easy to get connected with the senior leadership. I would love to, and I've got a few of the non-commissioned officers and a couple of the junior enlisted guys who are in the operation. I'd love to get more of the enlisted perspective on those operations. So yeah, if there's any corporals, sergeants, guys, the gals were privates at the time, I'd love to hear from you. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Well, I think that we'll end it there, and thank you again. I really appreciate the detail that you went into, and I really hope that this will help people who are dealing with difficult situations, or whether a wartime or any kind of other situations, that mental health is important, and talk about it, or seek some help. And I know that I think every combat veteran that I've talked to have said, yeah, I mean, don't be scared, but you got to make that first step, right? Yeah. So that will be it for today. I always say, don't go anywhere. I want to have a little chat with you before we officially sign off. So I will say thank you again, sir. And I wish you luck on your fourth book, right? Your fourth book.
Yes, fourth. Yes.
Okay.
Thank you, Jason.
All right. Thank you.